Galatians 2, verses 3 and 4 are where we're going to hit today as we're exploring on Galatians 2, where apostles meet with Paul. Paul meets with the apostles, goes before them. As we understand, he met with them privately. He walked through, make sure his race wasn't for nothing. In verse 3, as we pick up, he says, "And they supported me." So in other words, they approved of what he was doing and did not even demand that my companion Titus be circumcised, even though he was a Gentile. Other translations say a Greek. This is the first, as he's bringing up what becomes the major issues that the Galatians are dealing with. He explains in verse 4, even that question came up. So why are you even bringing up circumcision? All of a sudden you're talking to them about meeting with the Gentiles, and obviously we know Gentile to them, to the Jewish believers, meant simply non-Jewish, non-believers in the Jewish way. So he's been preaching to the Gentiles. He wanted to make sure there was an agreement there. And circumcision comes up. And circumcision was obviously given to Abraham as a way of marking the covenant between God's people and God in that time. And so they brought this up, and he says that question only came up because of some so-called believers, false ones. In other words, going back to that terminology, it's not a real gospel. Really, false brothers is another thing, another translation uses that, who were secretly brought in. They sneaked in to spy on us and to take away the freedom we have in Christ Jesus. They wanted to enslave us and force us to follow their Jewish regulations. Again, Paul pulling no punches here in what he's talking about. So Titus wasn't, pressured to get circumcised. And these believers, false brothers, he calls them, spies, enslavers. Other translations will use Judaizers. That came in to take away the freedom. And this is powerful language, strong words, but he really calls them this enslavers because the law enslaves while grace sets us free from the power of sin and death. So Paul pulls no punches here in calling them out here and builds upon this case here in verses 3 and 4. He talks about Titus and says they didn't even ask him to be circumcised. That them being, they didn't make a demand on Titus, they being the leaders of the church. Though the question was brought up because these false spies, fake believers, enslavers, other translations say Judaizers, come in and make a spectacle of this and, sneak in, spy on us. Man, he uses some strong, take away the freedom. They're enslaving us, force us to follow the Jewish regulations. And so Paul calls them out, and we're going to really see that this is really the crux of a lot of what happens here in Galatians is Paul calling that out. So hope this has been helpful in some way to bring some understanding. If you have any other questions, comments, anything to add on to it, anything to refute in what I said here, do that. Like, subscribe, and share. And talk to you later.